The wind howled across the frozen wasteland of planet Kareth like a living creature, screaming through broken ice mountains and endless white plains. The sky was dark gray, and heavy clouds covered the sun, making the whole world look cold and lifeless. Nothing should have survived in such a place, but something had been left there to die. Half buried in the snow was a young alien girl. Her silver armor was cracked and covered with frozen blood. Strange blue marks on the armor showed the symbol of a royal family. But now that symbol meant nothing, because the one who wore it had been abandoned. The girl's breathing was weak and slow. Her pale skin had turned almost blue from the cold, and frost had formed on her long white hair. She tried to move her hand, but the strength in her body was fading. Far away in the sky, a small human transport ship moved slowly above the storm. Inside the ship, a human explorer named Adam was watching his scanner carefully. He was not a soldier or a famous pilot. He was just a scavenger who searched empty planets for old technology and rare metals to sell. Adam had visited many dangerous worlds before, but even he knew Kareth was not a good place to stay long. The storms were deadly, and the cold could freeze a man in minutes. Suddenly, a soft sound came from the scanner. A weak signal appeared on the screen. Adam frowned and leaned closer to check it again. The signal was strange and very weak, almost like a heartbeat slowly fading. That cannot be right, he whispered to himself. No living creature should be here. But the signal was real. Curiosity pushed him to change the ship's direction and follow the signal. The small ship slowly descended toward the frozen surface. Wind and snow crashed against the metal body of the ship as it landed on the ice. Adam pulled on his heavy coat and stepped outside carefully. The cold air hit his face like a knife. Snow moved across the ground like waves. He activated his handheld scanner and followed the weak signal step by step through the snow. After a few minutes, he stopped suddenly. Something was lying ahead, half covered by snow. Adam walked closer and pushed the snow away with his glove, and then he froze in shock. It was a girl, but not human. Her ears were slightly pointed, and her skin had a faint silver glow. The armor she wore looked advanced and powerful, even though it was damaged. Adam quickly checked her breathing. It was weak, but still there. "You're alive," he said. Quietly surprised, he had seen many aliens before in trading stations, but never one like her. The royal symbol on her armor caught his attention. Even a simple scavenger like him knew that symbol belonged to one of the strongest alien empires in the galaxy. His mind filled with questions. Why was a royal alien alone on a frozen death world? And why was she dying here like someone had thrown her away? The girl suddenly moved slightly, and a weak breath escaped her lips. Adam could barely hear her voice in the storm. She whispered something in a strange language, and then slowly opened her eyes for a moment. Her eyes glowed faint blue and looked directly at him. Fear and pain were inside them. "Leave me," she whispered softly, before losing consciousness again. Adam stood there in silence for a moment while the storm roared around them. Leaving her here meant certain death, but helping her could bring very dangerous trouble. If the royal empire found out a human had taken there, Princess, it could start a disaster. Adam looked at the unconscious girl again and sighed quietly. "Yeah, this is a bad idea," he said, but he gently lifted her into his arms anyway and carried her back toward his ship. Far away in deep space, a massive alien warship moved silently through the darkness. Inside a giant throne room, an alien queen sat on a dark throne. Her cold eyes looked at a holographic screen, showing a small blinking signal on planet Kareth. The signal that marked her daughters. Life slowly moving again. The queen's voice was calm and dangerous as ice. "So, she is still alive," she said softly. "Send the hunters." The command echoed across the ship like a quiet death sentence. Back on the frozen planet, Adam placed the alien girl carefully inside the warm cabin of his ship and began checking her injuries. He had no idea that by saving her life, he had just placed himself between a ruthless queen and the daughter she wanted erased from the galaxy. Before the story continues, if you enjoy stories like this, please gently support the channel by subscribing so you do not miss the next part of this adventure. Adam looked once more at the strange girl lying unconscious on the medical bed and whispered quietly to himself, "Who are you? And why does someone want you dead?" The small transport ship moved slowly through the dark space above the frozen planet Kareth, its engines humming softly while the storm below faded into the distance. Inside the cabin, Adam worked quickly beside the narrow medical table where the alien girl lay unconscious. The soft blue lights of the ship reflected from her pale skin and broken armor. Her breathing was still weak, but steady, which surprised Adam because he had never treated an alien like her before. He carefully removed pieces of the damaged armor and placed a thermal blanket over her body to warm her. Strange symbols and glowing lines were carved into the armor plates, clearly marking her as someone very important. Adam rubbed the back of his neck and sighed quietly. He had planned a simple scavenging trip, not rescuing a dying alien princess from a frozen death world. He checked the scanner again and noticed something strange. The energy inside the girl's body was not normal. It moved like small waves of light under her skin, almost like living electricity slowly flowing through her veins. "What are you?" Adam whispered while adjusting the medical scanner. The machine beeped in confusion as if it could not understand the biology it was reading. Suddenly the girl's body moved slightly and her fingers twitched. Adam stepped closer and watched carefully as her eyes slowly opened. The faint blue glow inside them returned, and for a moment she looked directly at him with confusion and fear. She tried to move, but pain rushed through her body, and she gasped softly. Adam raised his hands gently to show he was not a threat and spoke in a calm voice. "Hey, easy. You are safe for now." The girl stared at him silently as if trying to understand what he was saying. Her voice was weak and broken when she finally spoke. "Human," she whispered slowly. The words sounded strange in her mouth. Adam nodded once. "Yeah, human. My name is Adam," he answered simply. The girl looked around the small cabin and her eyes filled with sudden panic. She tried to sit up, but the pain forced her back down again. "No, you should not help me," she said with urgency in her voice. Adam frowned slightly. "Why not?" he asked. The girl's breathing became heavier, and she looked at him with a deep sadness that felt far older than her young face. "Because if they find you with me, they will kill you," she whispered. Adam leaned back in his chair slowly and crossed his arms. "That sounds like a long story," he said. Quietly, the girl closed her glowing eyes for a moment as if gathering strength. Then she opened them again and spoke slowly. "My name is Lyra." Adam nodded slightly while listening. "Lyra, okay," he said. She continued in a weak voice. "My mother is the ruler of the Carthian Empire." Adam's eyes widened a little at those words because even humans had heard stories about that empire. It was powerful, ancient, and feared across many star systems. "Wait, you mean the alien queen?" Adam asked. Carefully, Lyra lowered her eyes and gave a small nod. Silence filled the cabin for a moment while Adam processed that information. He had not just rescued a random alien girl. He had rescued the daughter of one of the most dangerous rulers in the galaxy. Adam let out a slow breath and looked at the ceiling for a second. "Well, that explains the royal armor," he muttered quietly. Lyra looked at him again, and her voice became colder. "My mother does not want me alive," she said. Adam looked back at her quickly. "Why would a queen want her own daughter dead?" he asked. Lyra's glowing eyes showed pain and anger mixed together. "Because she believes I am a threat to her throne," she answered. Adam blinked in disbelief. "You look half dead." "Not dangerous," he said honestly. Lyra gave a weak smile that disappeared quickly. "You do not understand, human. I was born with something rare," she said quietly. "Something even my mother fears." Adam leaned forward with curiosity. "And what is that?" he asked. Lyra hesitated for a moment and then slowly raised her trembling hand. Faint blue light appeared around her fingers like soft flames dancing in the air. The lights moved and twisted with quiet power before fading again as her strength disappeared. Adam stared at her hand in silence. He had seen alien technology before, but this was different. This power came directly from her. That energy, it is inside your body. Adam said slowly. Lyra nodded weakly. "It is called the Royal Core," she explained softly. "An ancient power carried by the true blood of our empire. It can command fleets, control weapons, even awaken ancient machines that no one else can use." Adam felt a cold chill move through his spine as he listened. Lyra continued with a quiet sadness. My mother once believed I would become the greatest ruler of our people, but when my power began to grow stronger than hers, she became afraid. Adam leaned back again and shook his head slowly. So she tried to kill you, he said. Lyra closed her eyes and whispered. She called it exile, but she sent assassins to make sure I never returned. At that exact moment, a loud warning sound suddenly echoed through the ship's control panel. Red lights began flashing across the cabin walls. Adam jumped to his feet and rushed to the cockpit screen. The scanner showed several fast-moving signals entering the planet's orbit. The signals were large and powerful, far bigger than Adam's small ship. Lyra slowly turned her head toward the flashing lights, and her voice dropped to a fearful whisper. "They found me," she said. Adam's heart began to beat faster while he watched the screen carefully. 3 sleek alien hunter ships were already descending toward their location like silent predators. Adam gripped the control console tightly and spoke under his breath. "You have got to be kidding me." The engines of the small transport ship began warming up as he prepared for an emergency escape. Behind him, Lyra struggled to sit up despite the pain. Her glowing eyes filled with dread as she looked toward the stars beyond the window. "Those are my mother's hunters," she whispered, "and they never fail." The ship trembled slightly as Adam pushed the engines harder. The hunters were getting closer every second, and in that moment Adam realized something terrifying. By saving one dying girl in the snow, he had just made himself the enemy of an entire alien empire, and the hunt had already begun. The warning lights inside Adam's small transport ship continued flashing red, while the engines roared louder as they pushed away from the frozen planet Kareth. The 3 alien hunter ships appeared on the scanner as sharp red marks moving fast through the dark sky. They were closing the distance with frightening speed. Adam gripped the control console tightly while his mind raced. He had faced danger before as a scavenger. Pirates, broken stations, even hostile drones, but this was different. These ships belonged to one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, and they were hunting him. Behind him, Lyra struggled to sit up on the medical bed. The movement caused pain to rush through her body, but fear pushed her forward. She looked toward the cockpit with glowing eyes filled with worry. "They're faster than your ship," she said quietly. Adam did not turn around, but answered while focusing on the controls. "Yeah, I noticed," he said with dry humor. The ship shook slightly as he forced the engines to maximum power. The stars outside the window stretched into thin lines while the small ship tried to escape orbit. The scanner beeped again and showed the hunters getting closer. Adam knew he could not outrun them forever. Lyra slowly stood from the medical bed and walked unsteadily toward the cockpit wall to support herself. She watched the scanner screen, and her expression darkened. "They will not stop," she said softly. Adam glanced at her quickly. "Then maybe you should start explaining everything," he replied. "Because right now, I am risking my life for a mystery." Lyra remained silent for a moment, as if deciding how much truth she should reveal. Then she slowly spoke. "My exile was not only because of fear," she said quietly. Adam raised an eyebrow while adjusting the ship's direction. "There is more," he guessed. Lyra nodded slowly and looked down at her trembling hands. Faint light flickered across her fingers again before fading. "The royal core inside me is ancient," she explained. "It is older than the Carthian Empire itself, older than most civilizations in this galaxy." Adam listened carefully while keeping one eye on the scanner. Lyra continued in a low voice filled with both pride and sorrow. "Long ago, the first rulers of my people discovered a hidden source of power deep within the stars, a living energy that could connect with certain bloodlines. Those chosen few became the royal family. They could command fleets, activate forgotten weapons, and control machines built thousands of years ago." Adam whistled softly under his breath. "That sounds like something every ruler would want," he said. Lyra nodded. "Yes, but the royal core grows stronger with each generation, and sometimes a child is born with power far beyond the others." Adam's eyes narrowed slightly as he understood where this story was going. "You are that child," he said quietly. Lyra gave a small, sad smile. "My mother once celebrated my birth across the empire. She believed I would be the future queen," she said. "But as I grew older, the power inside me kept increasing, far more than anyone expected." Adam glanced at her again while guiding the ship through a field of drifting ice fragments left from the planet's broken moon. Let me guess, he said. Your mother stopped celebrating. Lyra looked toward the dark window where distant stars burned quietly. One day during a royal ceremony, the royal core inside me awakened fully, she said slowly. Ancient war machines inside the palace suddenly activated on their own. Old defense systems responded to my voice instead of hers. Adam nearly laughed in disbelief. So the Empire's weapons started listening to you, instead of the Queen, he said. Lyra nodded once. That was the moment everything changed, she whispered. From that day, my mother stopped seeing me as her daughter. She began seeing me as a rival. The ship suddenly shook as a bright beam of energy flashed past them outside the window. Adam cursed under his breath and pulled the controls hard to the side. One of the hunter ships had fired a warning shot. The distance between them was shrinking quickly. Adam accelerated again, while weaving through floating debris. Your family problems are trying to kill me right now, he muttered. Lyra stepped closer to the cockpit seat despite the pain and looked at the scanner. The red marks were almost within attack range. They will try to disable your engines first, she said. Quickly, Adam glanced at her with surprise. You sound very sure about that, he said. Lyra's expression turned cold and serious. Because those hunters once served under my command, she replied. Adam blinked once, but had no time to question it. Another beam shot past the ship, this one much closer, lighting the cockpit with a flash of blue light. Adam forced the ship downward toward the thick asteroid fragments around the planet's rings, hoping the rocks would block the hunters' targeting systems. Lyra suddenly grabbed the edge of the console as the ship rolled sharply. Pain spread across her face, but she ignored it. There is something else you must know, she said urgently. Adam exhaled slowly while guiding the ship through the dangerous field. I figured there would be, he replied. Lyra looked directly at him, her glowing eyes serious and heavy with truth. My mother did not only send hunters, she said quietly. She sent them with a command that cannot be broken. Adam felt a chill run through his body even before she finished speaking. Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper filled with dread. If they cannot capture me, they must destroy everything around me. Adam's hands tightened on the controls while the realization struck him hard. The hunters were not just chasing them. They were willing to erase entire ships, stations, maybe even planets, just to make sure Lyra disappeared forever. Outside the window, the dark shapes of the hunter ships grew larger as they entered the asteroid field behind them like silent predators. And in that moment, Adam understood the terrible truth. He had not only rescued an exiled princess, he had become the center of a royal hunt that would not stop until either Lyra was dead or the galaxy itself burned trying to kill her. The small transport ship trembled violently as Adam pushed the engines harder than they were ever meant to go. The warning alarms inside the cockpit screamed in sharp bursts while the control panel flashed with red lights. Outside the front window, thousands of broken asteroid fragments floated like dark mountains in space. Pieces of rock from the shattered moon of Kareth drifting slowly through the cold vacuum. Adam aimed the ship straight into the dangerous field without slowing down behind. Then the three alien hunter ships followed, like silent wolves, their sleek black bodies sliding easily through the darkness, their engines far more powerful than Adam's small scavenger craft. Inside the cockpit, Lyra held onto the sidewall to keep her balance as the ship rolled sharply between two spinning asteroids. Her injured body struggled to keep up with the violent movement, but she forced herself to stay standing. Her glowing blue eyes watched the scanner carefully. The hunter ships were spreading out, slowly surrounding them from different angles. Adam noticed the pattern and shook his head slowly. They are good, he muttered under his breath. Lyra's voice was calm but serious when she answered. They are the Queen's best trackers, she said quietly. They have hunted war criminals, rebels, and even entire pirate fleets across the galaxy. Adam exhaled slowly and tightened his grip on the control stick. Great, he replied with a tired smile. And today they get to hunt a scrap pilot with a broken cargo ship. Another bright energy beam suddenly cut through the darkness behind them and slammed into a large asteroid only meters away from Adam's ship. The explosion scattered glowing rock fragments across space, and the shockwave shook the small vessel violently. Lyra nearly lost her balance, but grabbed the back of Adam's seat just in time. "They are not trying to destroy us yet," she said quickly. Adam raised an eyebrow while dodging another floating rock. "Oh, that is comforting," he answered sarcastically. Lyra continued with a serious voice. "They want to disable the ship first. If they destroy you immediately, they risk damaging me as well." Adam's eyes flicked toward the scanner again. The 3 red marks had moved closer and were now forming a tight triangle around his position, slowly closing the trap. Adam knew this tactic well. He had seen pirates use it before. One ship chased from behind while the others moved to block escape routes. Except this time the hunters were far more skilled. The asteroid field suddenly became thicker and darker ahead of them. Giant chunks of black rock spinning slowly like drifting islands. Adam leaned forward slightly and narrowed his eyes as an idea formed in his mind. "Hold on," he said quietly. Lyra looked at him with confusion. "What are you planning?" she asked. Adam did not answer immediately. Instead, he pushed the ship even deeper into the field where the asteroids grew so dense that navigation became almost impossible. Warning alarms screamed louder as the ship's sensors struggled to track the obstacles around them. The hunters hesitated for a moment outside the edge of the field before following carefully behind. They were powerful ships, but even they could not fly recklessly through such a dangerous area. Inside the cockpit, Adam smiled slightly for the first time since the chase began. "Big ships hate tight spaces," he said calmly. Lyra watched the scanner again and realized what he meant. The hunters had slowed down slightly as they tried to navigate through the narrow paths between the giant rocks. Adam used the opportunity to twist the ship sharply around a spinning asteroid, diving through a narrow gap that looked barely wide enough for the ship's wings. Lyra's breath caught at her throat as the metal sides of the ship nearly scraped against the rock walls. But Adam's hands moved with surprising precision, guiding the vessel through the gap perfectly. "You fly like someone who has done this before," Lyra said quietly. Adam chuckled once without taking his eyes off the path ahead. "When you spend half your life stealing scrap from dangerous places, you learn a few tricks," he answered. The ship shot out of the narrow gap and quickly rolled behind a cluster of larger asteroids, temporarily hiding from the hunter's sensors. For a brief moment, the scanner screen cleared and the red marks disappeared. Silence filled the cockpit except for the sound of the engines. Lyra looked at Adam with new curiosity in her glowing eyes. She had spent her entire life surrounded by powerful commanders and trained soldiers. Yet this simple human pilot had just outmaneuvered 3 elite hunter ships using nothing but skill and courage. "Humans are strange," she said softly. Adam glanced at her quickly with a small grin. "You have no idea," he replied, but the quiet moment did not last long. The scanner suddenly beeped again, and 1 red mark appeared behind them. One of the hunters had predicted Adam's path and was already cutting through the asteroids to intercept them. Before Adam could react, the hunter ship fired a precise energy shot that struck the back of his transport ship. Sparks burst across the rear console, and the engines stuttered loudly. The ship lost speed instantly and drifted dangerously between 2 massive rocks. Adam slammed his hand against the control panel, trying to restart the damaged thrusters. Come on," he muttered urgently. Behind them, the hunter ship slowed down and moved closer like a patient predator approaching wounded prey. Lyra stared at the scanner with growing fear. "The others will arrive in seconds," she warned. Adam wiped sweat from his forehead and forced the engines to restart. The ship jerked forward again, but the power was weaker now. Smoke curled from one of the engine vents behind them. The hunter ship continued closing the distance until its dark shape became visible through the rear window, its weapon systems glowing faintly as they prepared to fire again. Lyra's expression hardened suddenly as she watched the approaching ship. Something deep inside her chest began to burn with quiet energy. The faint blue light returned to her hands and slowly spread across her arms like living fire. Adam noticed the glow in the reflection of the control screen and turned his head slightly. "Lyra, what are you doing?" he asked carefully. Lyra's glowing eyes locked onto the hunter ship behind them, and her voice became calm and powerful, very different from the weak voice she had before. "If we keep running," she said slowly, "they will destroy us eventually." Adam felt a strange tension in the air around her, as if the space itself was reacting to the power growing inside her body. The blue light around her hands grew brighter and began forming small arcs of energy between her fingers. Lyra looked toward the dark shape of the hunter ship one last time and whispered something in her ancient language, a command older than the Empire itself. And suddenly the power of the royal core began to awaken, filling the small ship with a silent storm of glowing energy while the hunters closed in, unaware that the prey they were chasing was no longer helpless. The inside of the small transport ship suddenly felt different, as if the air itself had become heavier with invisible energy. Adam noticed the change immediately, even though he did not fully understand it. The control panel lights flickered softly, and the faint hum of the ship's systems began to vibrate with a strange rhythm. He turned his head slowly toward Lyra and saw the glowing blue light spreading across her hands and arms like quiet fire. The light was not violent or wild. It moved smoothly, almost like it was alive and breathing with her. Outside the rear window, the hunter ship continued closing in, its weapons slowly charging, but inside the cockpit something far more powerful was beginning to awaken. Lyra stood still beside the control console with her eyes half closed, as if she were listening to a voice only she could hear. The blue glow from her hands slowly stretched outward, and tiny threads of light floated in the air around her fingers. Adam stared for a moment in complete disbelief before shaking his head and focusing on the controls again. Lyra, if that is some kind of alien magic, now would be a good time to explain it, he said quickly while struggling to keep the damaged engines running. Lyra opened her glowing eyes and looked toward the front window, where distant stars shined like silent witnesses. Her voice, when she spoke, sounded calm but powerful, very different from the weak voice she had before. "It is not magic," she said softly. "It is the royal core responding to danger." Adam glanced back at her again, while dodging another spinning asteroid. "Well, whatever it is, I hope it works fast," he replied. Behind them, the hunter ship fired another energy beam that narrowly missed the ship and exploded against a floating rock. The flash of light filled the cockpit for a moment before fading again. Lyra slowly stepped closer to the center of the cockpit, the glowing energy around her hands becoming brighter with each second. Small sparks of light floated around her like glowing dust. "The royal core is more than a weapon," she said quietly. "It is a key." Adam frowned slightly while listening. "A key to what?" he asked. Lyra raised her glowing hand slowly and pointed toward the control panel. Her eyes focused deeply, as if she could see something hidden inside the machine. "A key to ancient technology," she answered. Adam was about to ask another question when suddenly the ship systems reacted. The control panel screens flickered rapidly and strange alien symbols appeared across the display. Symbols Adam had never seen before. The engine systems suddenly stabilized and the damaged thrusters began running smoother. Even though Adam had not touched the controls, his eyes widened in shock. "Wait, I did not fix that," he said quietly. Lyra did not move her hand, but the glowing threads of energy slowly reached toward the console like invisible wires connecting to the ship's systems. "The core can communicate with machines," she explained, "even ones that are not from my empire." Adam blinked in disbelief. "You are telling me your power can repair my ship?" he asked. Lyra shook her head slowly. "Not repair, guide," she corrected. "Machines respond to the core because it carries the same energy used in many ancient technologies across the galaxy." Adam looked back at the scanner screen and noticed something strange happening. The ship's sensors had suddenly expanded far beyond their normal range. The scanner now showed detailed movements of the asteroid field and the positions of the hunter ships with perfect clarity. "Okay, now that is useful," Adam muttered. The hunter ship behind them fired another shot, but this time Adam easily dodged it by following a narrow path between two fast-spinning rocks. The enhanced scanner showed every movement before it happened, giving him the advantage for the first time since the chase began. Lyra slowly lowered her glowing hand, but the light around her body remained bright. Her breathing was deeper now, but steadier, as if she was learning to control the power flowing through her. "There is more," she said quietly. Adam glanced at her again while guiding the ship forward. "I had a feeling you were going to say that," he replied. Lyra looked toward the rear window, where the hunter ship continued chasing them through the asteroid field, its engines glowing like angry stars in the darkness. The Royal Core does not only connect to machines, she continued softly. It can command them. Adam's eyebrows lifted slightly. Command them how? He asked. Lyra raised her glowing hand once more and focused on the distant hunter ship behind them. Her voice dropped into the ancient language again, the same mysterious words she had spoken earlier. The glowing threads of energy around her fingers suddenly shot forward through the air like invisible lightning, passing through the walls of the ship and racing silently across space toward the hunter vessel. For a moment, nothing happened. Adam continued flying while watching the scanner nervously. Then suddenly, the hunter ship's signal flickered violently. The red mark on the scanner began blinking wildly as if its systems were failing. Adam leaned closer to the screen in surprise. What did you just do? He asked. Lyra's glowing eyes remained fixed behind them while she whispered softly. I reminded their machines who the true royal blood is. Outside the ship, the hunter vessel suddenly lost control. Its engines sputtered and its navigation systems glitched as the ancient energy from Lyra's core flooded through its circuits. The sleek black ship drifted sideways and crashed violently into a massive asteroid. The explosion lit the dark field with a bright orange flash that faded slowly into silence. Inside the cockpit, Adam stared at the scanner where one of the red marks had completely disappeared. Only 2 hunter ships remained now, following from farther away. Clearly confused by what had just happened, Adam slowly leaned back in his seat and let out a long breath. Remind me never to get on your bad side, he said quietly. Lyra lowered her glowing hand, and the blue light around her body slowly began fading again. The effort had drained much of her strength. She leaned slightly against the wall to stay standing. Adam noticed her weakness and looked at her with concern. That power, it hurts you, he said carefully. Lyra nodded faintly. I am not fully trained to control it yet, she admitted. Adam turned back toward the stars ahead and pushed the ship forward through the asteroid field again. But far away beyond the broken moons of Kerith, something else had already seen the explosion. Deep in the darkness of space, a massive fleet of Carthian warships waited silently like sleeping giants. And inside the throne chamber of the largest ship, the alien queen watched the glowing holographic map in front of her with cold, emotionless eyes. The signal of one hunter ship had vanished completely. The queen slowly stood from her throne, and her long dark robes moved across the floor like flowing shadows. Her voice when she spoke was calm but filled with deadly certainty. So the power has awakened, she said quietly. The officers around her lowered their heads in silence. The queen's glowing eyes narrowed slightly as she gave her next command. Prepare the fleet, she ordered coldly. If my daughter wishes to use the royal core, then I will personally remind her why she should have stayed in exile. Far beyond the broken moons of Kerith, deep in the silent darkness between star systems, the Carthian war fleet began to move. Dozens of massive warships slowly awakening from standby mode as glowing lines of energy traveled across their armored hulls. Each ship was many times larger than Adam's small transport vessel, their sharp black designs shaped like blades meant for war. Engines larger than buildings burned with deep blue fire as they powered up one by one. The cold vacuum of space trembled with the power of the fleet preparing for battle. At the center of the formation floated the largest ship of all, the Royal Command vessel known across the galaxy as the Queen's Spear. Its massive structure carried ancient weapons capable of destroying entire cities from orbit. Inside the throne chamber, the alien queen stood tall before a floating holographic map of the surrounding star systems. Her silver crown reflected the pale light of the star charts, while her glowing violet eyes studied the blinking signals carefully. One hunter ship had been destroyed. The remaining 2 continued tracking the small human vessel carrying her daughter. The queen's expression showed no anger or panic, only quiet calculation. She slowly folded her hands behind her back and spoke in a calm voice that echoed through the chamber. My daughter has awakened the core earlier than expected, she said. Several armored officers standing below her throne bowed their heads respectfully. One commander stepped forward and spoke carefully. "Your Majesty, shall we order the hunters to eliminate the human ship immediately?" The queen shook her head slightly. Her voice remained cold but thoughtful. "No. If Lyra has begun using the royal core, we must capture her alive. Destroying the vessel could risk damaging the core itself." The commander nodded and quickly stepped back. The queen's eyes returned to the holographic map where the small signal of Adam's ship moved through the asteroid. "Feel like a tiny spark among giants. Prepare the fleet to jump," she ordered quietly. "I will end this personally." Far away near the edge of the asteroid field, Adam's transport ship finally cleared the thick cluster of floating rocks and entered open space again. The stars stretched endlessly in every direction while the broken rings of Kerith slowly faded behind them. Adam leaned back in his seat for a moment and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The chase through the asteroid field had nearly destroyed his engines, but somehow the ship was still moving. Lyra stood beside the cockpit wall, breathing slowly as the last traces of blue light faded from her hands. Using the royal core had drained much of her strength, and she looked pale again. Adam glanced at her with concern while adjusting the ship's direction. "You should sit down before you collapse again," he said quietly. Lyra gave a small, tired nod and slowly lowered herself into the co-pilot's seat. She stared out the front window where the calm stars seemed peaceful compared to the chaos they had just escaped. For a brief moment, silence filled the cockpit. The danger felt distant again, but the quiet did not last long. Suddenly, the scanner on Adam's console began to beep rapidly. The sound was different this time, deeper and more urgent. Adam frowned and leaned forward to check the display. At first, he thought the scanner was broken because the screen suddenly filled with dozens of red signals appearing all at once. His eyes widened slowly as he realized what he was seeing. That is not possible," he whispered. Lyra immediately leaned closer to the screen, and the color drained from her face. The signals were too many to count. Large ships, massive energy readings far beyond the power of the hunters they had escaped earlier. Lyra's voice became quiet with dread as she spoke the words Adam did not want to hear. "It is the royal fleet," she said softly. Adam stared at the scanner in stunned silence while more red marks continued appearing across the display like a spreading storm. The fleet had just arrived from hyperspace directly in their path, filling the dark space ahead of them with warships that dwarfed Adam's small transport vessel. Outside the front window, faint blue flashes of light appeared in the distance as the enormous Carthian ships completed their jump into the system. One after another, they emerged from hyperspace like giants waking from sleep, their glowing engines lighting the darkness like artificial stars. Adam slowly leaned back in his seat and let out a long breath. "Please tell me that fleet belongs to someone friendly," he muttered weakly. Lyra shook her head slowly, her glowing eyes filled with sadness. "No," she answered quietly. "That fleet belongs to my mother." The scanner suddenly emitted another sharp warning tone as a powerful transmission signal locked onto Adam's ship. The communication screen flickered and activated automatically. Without his permission, a tall holographic figure appeared in the center of the cockpit. The image was clear and cold. The alien queen herself stood before them wearing dark royal armor, her long silver hair flowing behind her like pale fire. Her glowing violet eyes looked directly at Lyra first and then slowly shifted toward Adam, studying the human pilot with calm curiosity. The room felt colder just from her presence alone. The queen spoke with a voice that was soft yet powerful enough to command armies. "Lyra," she said slowly, "you have caused quite a disturbance for someone who was meant to disappear quietly." Lyra straightened in her seat despite her weakness and stared back at the hologram of her mother with a mixture of fear and determination. Adam remained silent beside her while watching the massive fleet gathering outside the ship's windows. The queen's eyes moved toward him again, and her expression showed faint interest. "So this is the human who decided to rescue my daughter," she said calmly. Adam rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly and gave a small shrug. "She looked like she needed help," he answered honestly. The queen studied him for a moment before speaking again, her voice now colder than before. "Return my daughter immediately, and your life will be spared," she said. "Refuse, and my fleet will erase your ship from existence." The threat hung in the air like a silent storm, while the enormous Carthian fleet slowly surrounded the small transport. Vessel from every direction. Adam looked at the scanner once more, and then toward the endless warships outside the window. It was the most powerful fleet he had ever seen, enough firepower to destroy entire planets if they wished. Beside him, Lyra slowly clenched her hands as faint blue light began flickering between her fingers again. Her eyes locked onto the hologram of the Queen. The moment of running was almost over. And for the first time since the chase began, Adam realized the terrible truth. Escaping the hunters had only been the beginning, because now they were facing the ruler of the Empire herself, and the entire fleet of the Carthian Queen had come to claim her daughter. Adam's small transport ship felt impossibly fragile as it floated in the shadow of the massive Carthian fleet, every window a reminder of the countless weapons trained on them. The stars beyond were bright but distant, a silent backdrop to the storm of power surrounding them. Inside the cockpit, Adam's hands gripped the control stick tightly, his knuckles white, while Lyra sat in the co-pilot's seat, trembling slightly, her glowing blue eyes flickering with faint energy. The royal core inside her pulsed gently, as if sensing the enormous presence of her mother's fleet. The alien queen's holographic figure remained in the cockpit, her gaze piercing through the ship as if she could see every weakness. The cold, commanding voice spoke again. "Lyra, submit," she said softly. "Return to me and end this foolish defiance." Lyra's hands clenched onto the edge of the console as she looked up at the projection of her mother. Her voice steady despite exhaustion. "I will not submit," she said. Quietly, Adam blinked, amazed at her courage. "Good for you," he whispered under his breath. "Now let's make sure we survive." The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly as if surprised by the defiance. She tilted her head slowly, and her voice dropped colder than ice. "You dare defy me, human?" Adam swallowed and spoke carefully. "I don't care who you are," he said. "Humans don't abandon people, even if the galaxy tells us to." The holographic image flickered for a moment, as if the Queen's wrath had been triggered by his words. Outside the ship, the fleet shifted slightly, energy beams flashing briefly as the immense vessels prepared for attack. Adam glanced at the scanner and noticed the two remaining hunter ships hesitating, clearly confused by the sudden display of power from Lyra. He turned toward her. "Whatever you are about to do, be ready," he warned. Lyra slowly stood, the blue light around her hands flaring brighter than it had before, threads of glowing energy floating outward as if alive. The royal core inside her was fully awake now, responding to the massive presence of the Queen's fleet. Adam could feel in the ship vibrations that had nothing to do with the engines. Something ancient and powerful had awakened. Lyra spoke softly, almost whispering words in her own language, and the energy around her grew, stretching across the ship, connecting with the sensors, systems, and even the faint signals of the distant Carthian vessels. Adam's eyes widened as the scanner began to flicker, the red marks of the approaching fleet twitching as if struggling to maintain control. Outside, the Queen's massive command ship hesitated, her own fleet faltering slightly. The power that Lyra wielded was ancient, unpredictable, and clearly beyond anything they had trained for. She raised both hands now, letting the royal core pour out like quiet lightning, and Adam realized something impossible. The core was not just a power of destruction, it was a power of command, ancient and absolute. The energy raced across the empty space between them and the nearest Carthian warship, lights flickering and systems glitching, alarms blaring on the enemy ships. The two hunter vessels struggled to maintain formation, their weapons misfiring as the power from the core disrupted their systems. Adam's small ship shuddered violently as Lyra's energy expanded, and yet she remained in control, guiding it, breathing with it. Her face pale but determined, the Queen's holographic image flickered violently, the calm authority of before replaced with a hint of shock. Her voice rose slightly in anger and disbelief. "Lyra, stop this immediately," she commanded, but her words carried no effect. The royal core responded to Lyra alone, ancient bonds that even the Queen could not break. Outside the ship, the hunter vessels began to drift, unable to maintain speed or orientation. energy arcs rippling across their hulls as Lyra's power reached further into the fleet. Adam realized the human pilot instinct he had relied on suddenly became useless against the raw force Lyra now wielded, but he kept his hands steady on the controls, trusting her completely. "Hold on," he shouted as Lyra extended the core toward the entire fleet. The massive ships rocked violently as their engines and weapons systems flickered, lights flashing across their hulls like dying stars. The Queen's voice now sharp and trembling. "You will not. You cannot." Lyra ignored her, focusing on controlling the energy, the royal core flowing through every ancient mechanism it could reach. And then, in a brilliant flash of blue-white light, the fleet's signals suddenly went silent, the enormous warships freezing in place mid-space. Their energy lines flickering and dying like controlled storms suddenly cut off. Adam's heart pounded in disbelief. He slowly turned toward Lyra, who was leaning against the console, exhausted, sweat running down her face, but still glowing faintly with the remnants of the core's power. Outside, the vast Carthian fleet floated silently, completely immobilized, their might rendered useless by the power of the very daughter they had come to capture. The Queen's hologram flickered and finally vanished from the cabin, replaced by the empty black space of distant stars. Adam slowly exhaled. "You did it," he whispered. Lyra's lips curved in a faint smile, almost a shadow of relief. "I had to," she said softly. "If I ran, they would have destroyed everything." Adam nodded, looking at the massive ships around them, and then back at her. "And now? What do we do?" Lyra's glowing eyes met his, determination finally settling fully over exhaustion. "Now," she said quietly, "we prepare for what comes next." The young princess who had once been abandoned on a frozen wasteland had become a force strong enough to challenge an empire, and the small human beside her, once a simple scavenger, had proven that courage and defiance could stand against even the greatest power in the galaxy. The stars beyond the window stretched endlessly, silent witnesses to the beginning of a new chapter, one where a human and a princess could face the universe together. And for the first time, Adam realized that some battles were never about strength alone, but about standing for what was right, no matter the cost. And in that moment, he knew this was only the beginning.